My friend Peter came to me with this guitar asking me to take a look at it. He paid about $230 for it. And it's a red label Yamaha FG230, 12 string. Let's see, they made these from 68 to 72. So late 60s, early 70s. And there's the red label, see that? Yeah. So these guitars, all the red label guitars have a good reputation, and I found even the Taiwanese guitars made all the way to the very early 80s are just about as good, really. But you're talking about guitars that are in the neighborhood of 50 years old, and sometimes people don't realize what they're getting into. So whether you're buying a guitar online or in person, there's things that you should definitely look for. And they're not all necessarily particular to these guitars, but since these guitars are sought after and they're, in the range of 50 years, I just thought I'd talk about what to look for if you want one, because it can cost you hundreds of dollars to get it in good playing condition. And if you can do it yourself, great. But if you can't, you should really take that into consideration. So the first thing I always look for, especially if it's an online guitar somewhere, is I'm looking at the action. And sometimes people will tell you what the action is here. So the standard is to look at the action at the 12th fret, and I use millimeters because I can't deal with fractional things with inches. So typically the highest action you'd want on a steel string like this is 3 millimeters here. That's the height of the string over the fret. And on the first string, maybe a millimeter lower if you can manage it. Sometimes it's maybe 3/4. So you might have, like, for example, on an older guitar, 3 millimeters over here on the 6th string and 2.25 millimeters here on the 1st string at the 12th fret, and that's playable. But to me, that's not ideal. Usually I like to have it maybe 2.75 or even 2.5 on the 6th string and 2.25 to maybe 2 over here on the 1st string. It's easier to play, and hopefully, if everything else is okay, you won't get buzzing. Some people go even a little lower, but I think 2.5 and 2 is kind of a good ballpark to shoot for. Now, unfortunately, over the years, the stress of the strings pulling on the neck at the 2 anchor points causes the action to get higher and higher over time. So this particular guitar, let's see, what was it? It was 3.5 millimeters here at the 6th string and 3 millimeters here at the 1st string. And I think for me, having 3 millimeters on the 1st string, that's a little tougher to play, I think. So if you get this straight edge and you run it along the frets, you hear that noise? That's because it's hitting the bridge, the wood, and you don't want that. So to know that you have a chance of lowering the action on the guitar is still workable. You want this edge of the straight edge to just miss the top of the bridge. So it should just pass just over it. And if you have a little more room even, that's great. It's better to want to raise the action on these guitars than to try to lower it. So typically what happens is they lower the saddle as much as they can, lower, 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 trying to lower the action. But eventually you get to the point where you just can't go any lower. And the break angle, that's the angle of the strings from the saddle to the pins, is just almost flat. It's just a very small angle. You don't want that. You want a little more of an angle so you get better tone. And I've even seen guitars where the saddle's been lowered so much that it's actually touching the wood of the bridge before it even reaches the pin. So if you see that on an old guitar, then you know you're probably in trouble as far as the action goes. There's nowhere to go. What it is probably as good as it's going to get, and that already might be kind of high. And that's something that's not necessarily easy to fix, So what happens is the body of the guitar sort of collapses, especially around the sound hole, and that raises this area up a bit. And in addition to that, you get what you call a belly bulge, which I don't know if you can see this, but there you see how the bridge and that area of the sound, how it's tilting forward instead of like this, it's like this. Okay, that's the dreaded belly bulge, and you can see the result. And what that does is it raises the action. that is not simple or easy to fix. There's a product called the Bridge Doctor out there, which will pull the bridge down a little bit this way. I've tried some experimental techniques of steaming the guitar and to flatten the belly bulge, and sometimes that will work. And then there's the dreaded neck reset, right, where you just take the neck off at this joint and the top of the fretboard, it all comes off, and then you rework the angle to change the angle of the neck so that you lower the action. First of all, people don't like to do that on these vintage Yamahas. They used a weird glue sometimes. Some people think it might be an epoxy. They refer to it as the mystery green glue. It simply just is a lot more of a pain and more difficult to loosen that glue so you can get the neck off. So a lot of techs won't do it. And when you're talking about something that's going to cost you probably at least $300, because besides that, there's going to be adjustments. Probably going to need a new saddle. You might need a new nut, etc., etc. It could easily cost you $450 to fix that action if you do it the traditional way. Peter paid $235. I don't think he was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to pay another $400 to get my action, in a comfortable playing position. So look for that low saddle. Okay, if it's sitting very low on the slot, that's a warning sign that you could be in for some big money to try to fix it. Or even if you do it yourself, it's gonna take some time. So as long as we're in this area, and this is where like the first thing to look for trouble, I'm gonna show you there's a crack along the bridge, and that comes from a combination of the wood drying out, not being treated with oil occasionally, and people pushing the pins down too hard. If they don't fit perfectly or the string is a little stuck and not where it should be, they press down on the pins and then you get this crack along the pinholes. Okay, I removed the pins so you could see. Now here it's chipped. Here it's actually starting to crack. Okay. And oftentimes you get a crack all the way from this pin hole all the way across. So this one's sort of in between. Not a terrible crack, but something you should at least keep an eye on. Okay, sometimes that's a bigger problem than other times, but when I see it, it can be fixed. So either by just replacing the whole bridge, which as you can imagine is not going to be cheap, or just by using some hydration and glue. So as long as we're in this area and all the trouble you can run into, another thing to look for is this bridge will sometimes be shaved down. People will remove the bridge, they'll sand it, so the gap here is lower, and that has the result basically of lowering the action. I personally don't like to do that. I like to leave the guitar as original as possible, but it's another technique that some people use when they're sort of desperate. And then if we look inside this guitar to what's called the bridge plate, I'll show you that in a second. And here's the damaged bridge plate, where you can see the back end there. See how that piece is splintered off? Yeah, so that's the whole bridge plate's gonna be replaced, really. The bridge plate's in bad shape, it's cracked. There's been times when I've been able to repair a bridge plate, but this cannot be repaired. The whole bridge plate needs to come off and replaced, and that's time consuming. I see people charging as much as $200 to replace that bridge plate. Okay, so what happened to the $230 guitar, right? And we haven't even left the bridge area. So, pick guard is loose, can you see that? That needs to be re-glued. That's not particularly expensive. The frets are worn, unfortunately. If you get one of these gauges with the notches, yeah, here are those notches, see? You just put that like that and you just see how much frets you have. In this case, even let's see, that's the wrong one, sorry. So what do we got here? Just rock it and see. Okay, so This is on the very smallest notch, the one at this end. That's all that's left. So it's really not going to be super playable. It'll still work, but sort of like there's nowhere left to go over here in terms of your action. There's nowhere left to go with these frets. You can't really, resurface them. Like if you have to level them and crown them, by the time you've done all that, you'll really be past the point where there's enough material there for these frets to function well. In addition to that, they also have some ridges in them where the strings have worn away a little bit of the metal. So that's okay. They're not real deep, but if you really want a good playing guitar, you're not going to have much time left with these frets, and you're going to need new frets. Okay, and then cheapest I've seen is what, $250 maybe, could be $350 for a fret job. And then we go to the nut. This nut, because it's a 12-string guitar, has 12 slots in it. Okay, only problem is the strings aren't on it now, but when I checked it out, it's basically 6 pairs of 2 strings each, right? Well, for each pair, the nut slots should make it so the 2 adjacent strings, the pair of strings, are the same height. In this case, guess what? The adjacent strings, some of them are not the same height. So basically, you either have to try to fill these nut slots in or install a new nut. Make sure those nut slots are correct. And then we come to the truss rod, which I'll show you in a second. It's chewed up. Here's the truss rod nut. As you can see here. There you see it. See how that's a little bit stripped, a little damaged. It's a little rounded, not too bad. But if you can see inside there, you got some metal, some rough metal showing, which means that there's already been a little damage to that nut. This looks probably workable, but if you get a truss rod nut that's more chewed up than this, you might have some real problems with trying to turn it, especially if it hasn't been moved in a long time. It could be quite stiff, not want to go. Very easy to either strip these, or in this case it's partially stripped. Could be in for problems. Okay, tuners. These are very cool strip tuners on the back. Here, let me show you. Original. However, some of them are loose. Hear that rattle? Some aren't. Okay, so where's the issue? Is it just a loose screw? Are they just distorted in some way so they're not snug anymore? What's the problem? If you're gonna have to get new tuners, it's gonna cost you a pretty penny. I guarantee you, anybody selling these online are probably gonna ask for $80, maybe $120. And while we're at it, I didn't take that truss rod cover off here. It's just missing. And this particular one is a metal truss rod. Very cool. I've seen them online for $75 used. Okay, so I don't know. I'll find one eventually, but obviously that's a lot of money just for a little piece of metal. But it's because they're vintage guitars and they're sought after, and people want it to look, as original as possible and look authentic. So people can ask that much money for it. So let's take a look at some guitars that have, okay, as long as I'm at it, this obviously has got cosmetic issues. See all those nicks? And this one that takes the cake, okay? That's some of the worst buckle rash I've ever seen. So I know guys, when they play the guitar, they loosen their belt a little and they put the buckle to the side. Not a bad idea. This is actually a little difficult to deal with. You can make it look better with a little bit of work, but if you really want to make it look really good, like you hardly notice it, it's actually quite time consuming. So if you were to want that fixed, a lot of guitar techs won't even mess with that. They just don't like doing finish works on finishes. So, okay, my beauty. So let's get another guitar that I've worked on from the same era, and I'll show you some of the things. Okay, what is this? This is a FG331. These are one of the Taiwanese models. It's about orchestra sized. the 12 string obviously was more like what Yamaha, because their jumbo size was essentially a dreadnought size. So this one was pretty successful. Cosmetically, it was just in better shape to begin with. I really just didn't do too much to it cosmetically other than just to clean it up. So that was one reason I decided to put some effort into it. So now it's a really nice guitar. It has a different kind of pick guard, but it's a cool, like, it's actually almost like a little piece of plywood for the truss rod cover. The truss rod nut is not chewed up at all. It's in really good shape. I had to put new frets on it, obviously new strings, a new nut and saddle, same plastic pins. Bridge plate needed a little repair, but it wasn't as torn up as the other one was. And let's see, the tuners, these are the original tuners. They work well, but they needed a little tweaking here and there, a little lubrication. Now they're just fine. So this is a nice guitar. I really like it. But there are also what I call cowboy canyons, which are gouges in the fretboard from playing the open chords up here. You know, people don't trim their nails, and so eventually you get these gouges in the fretboard, especially 1 through 3. So I was able to repair that. You can like hardly notice it now. You can't see those gouges hardly at all unless you look really closely. So that was successful. So this is what a guitar can be if it's not in horrible cosmetic shape to begin with. And the action on this thing, where did I get it to? Let's see. Okay, it started out, believe it or not, at 4.25 millimeters here at the 6th string, and 3.75 millimeters here at the 1st string. And I got it down to 2.25 millimeters over here, which is really good for a vintage guitar like this. And at the 1st string, I got it to 2 millimeters. So it's really easy to play, pretty buttery, and that was a great success. I did not do a neck reset. I just used steaming techniques. I put a new saddle on it, so there's more. The saddle is at a nice height, you know. You actually could lower it a little bit if you wanted to, and it gives a good break angle here. This is what a good saddle looks like in terms of height. And if you can see from the side there, the angle of the string from the saddle to the pin is quite good. It's not flat, and you can see as you go down the saddle, the angle is going to be a little flatter, but this is still pretty good. That's what you're looking for, but for guitars this old, it's rarely the case. Here's another guitar. Let's see. FG75. These are fun guitars. They're more like a New Yorker size, so almost the size of a classical guitar, maybe a little deeper. These had very plain plastic black pick guards. This was a similar situation. I couldn't get the action quite as low. The saddle is a little bit lower. It had a split bridge. It had a lot of things. But again, it was a good cosmetic condition. And that's something that's hard to replicate or to repair, honestly. So, tuner's a little stiff. I have to work on the tuners a little bit. Again, you got these strip tuners. Don't ask me what people would be charging for these. Probably less than a 12 string, but probably a good amount of money. So this is good guitar. To me, it doesn't sound quite as good as the Taiwanese Yamaha, but really comfortable guitar, a smaller size, and this one was in great condition. However, any of these guitars, to get them into good playing shape, I would say if you had to pay somebody else, you're looking at least $400 minimum. And if you can do it yourself, great. But if you can do it yourself, you probably know what you're getting into. So, moral of the story is, these are great guitars, but they're typically around 50 years old. And look for those things which I pointed out if you can, and realize that some of these are quite expensive repairs because they're time consuming. So be careful, don't end up like Peter, just kidding Peter, with that, you pay $230 for a red label guitar and you're looking at, $400 or $500 of work to make it a good playing guitar. Okay, have fun out there. I hope you find a nice red label or maybe a Taiwanese guitar, maybe the late 70s, early 80s, and it's in a good condition and you enjoy it.